Picture a building where every single room exists to make someone else comfortable, where the walls are painted by masters and the floors are polished until they hold your reflection like still water, and the air smells of beeswax and expensive perfume and the faint ghost of last night's candles. Picture a place where hundreds of people work every hour of every day, specifically so that a handful of other people never have to think about the effort required to keep them alive. Fires appear before anyone is cold. Food appears before anyone is hungry. Hot water appears in porcelain basins before anyone has asked. The whole machinery of comfort runs on invisible labour, invisible hands, invisible lives. Now picture what happens to one of those invisible hands if someone looks too closely. That's London in 1727, a city of 500,000 people packed into streets that smell like the inside of a slaughterhouse and the outside of a tannery, where the Thames at low tide gives off a smell so thick and alive that newcomers sometimes genuinely retch, where coal smoke has turned the buildings a uniform grey-black, and the fog in winter carries actual particles of soot that you can feel landing on the skin of your face. A city where the richest man in the country and the man dying in the gutter outside the gin shop share the same square mile of poisoned air. A city where you can watch an Italian opera at the King's Theatre in the evening and step over a body on your way home, and both of these things are completely normal. A city that is, at this particular moment in history, the centre of an empire, the heart of global commerce, the birthplace of newspapers and coffee houses and insurance markets, and all the other machinery of modern civilization, and also a city with a law on its books that says a man can be executed for loving another man, not just a law on paper, an active law, an enforced law, a law that has in the last 10 years sent real men to prison, to the pillory, to the gallows, a law backed by constables who raid the places where men like you gather, by magistrates who take notes with an expression of professional disgust, by crowds who show up to throw stones at the men in the pillory because the courts have decided that public humiliation should come before whatever other punishment follows. That's the world you're living in. That's the tightrope you walk every single day. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists looking at the portraits of dead kings and the gilded ceilings and the marble fireplaces. We're living it. 1 year, 1 footman. Everything he would have seen and smelled and survived and hidden. I make these history stories, and I'll tell you honestly, this one sat in my notes for a long time before I was ready to tell it properly. Not because it's too dark, though it is dark. My regular listeners know I'm not afraid of dark, but because this one requires something more than just atmosphere. It requires understanding that the person living this story was not broken, not sick, not confused. He was living in a world that had decided, without asking him, that what he was made him a criminal, that the particular way his heart worked made him eligible for the hangman. So, get comfortable. Breathe. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness, not the complete darkness of the attic room above the draper's shop where you spent your first 2 years in London. That was a comfortable darkness, softened by the familiar sounds of the street below and the smell of sizing and wool that soaked through the floorboards. This darkness is different. This is the darkness of a basement room in a house so large that the basement alone is bigger than most people's entire homes, and the walls down here are stone, and the stone holds cold in a way that wood never does, and the cold is the first thing you feel every morning. A cold that sits in the joints of your fingers and the backs of your knees and the places where your body meets the thin mattress. The smell comes next. It always does. Tallow. The cheap candles they burn down here in the servants' quarters, not the good beeswax ones that go upstairs where the family lives. Tallow smells like an animal, like rendered fat, which is exactly what it is. It's a low, greasy smell that sits in the back of your throat. Under that, boot blacking. The particular sharp chemical smell of the polish you'll be applying in about 20 minutes to the 6 pairs of shoes currently lined up on the rack outside the door. Under that, the smell of at least 8 other people sleeping in rooms nearby. The accumulated heat and breath and sweat of bodies that work hard and don't always have access to hot water. And underneath all of it, so constant that you barely register it anymore, the smell of this building, of old stone and wood polish and coal fires and 200 years of accumulated domestic life. Welcome to Cavendish House, London, the 14th of March, 1727. You're lying on a straw mattress that is your private luxury. You have your own mattress, your own room, and just barely a cell-like space carved out of the larger dormitory room with a wooden partition that doesn't reach the ceiling. You've been here 2 years. You know by feel alone where every nail is in that partition, where the board that lets in the draught from the corridor is, where the mouse has made a hole in the baseboard that the other footmen keep meaning to block and never do. Your name is Thomas Ashworth. You're 20 years old, and you came here from the village of Wethersham in Suffolk with a letter of recommendation from the rector, and a set of very good posture that your mother spent 15 years drilling into you. You arrived here believing genuinely that the hardest thing about this job would be standing still for long enough. You were wrong about that. The other hard thing didn't have a name, or rather, it had a name you weren't supposed to say. It had a name that the law used, and the church used, and your master would use if he ever found out. A name that carried with it a list of consequences so severe that you have never, in 2 years, said it aloud in relation to yourself. You have thought it. In the privacy of this partitioned cell, in the darkness lying on this mattress. You've thought it the way you might think about a door you know exists but have decided very deliberately not to open. The door has been getting harder to keep closed. That is what this year is about. You get up. The cold floor under your bare feet is a small shock. The same small shock as every morning, something you never quite get used to. The other footman who shares the room on the other side of the partition, a boy named Edward Sparrow, 17 years old from Ipswich, who snores with a consistency that you've come to find almost comforting, is still sleeping. You can hear him through the thin wood. The basin of water on the small table by the partition is cold. Obviously, everything is cold this time of year. The fire in the footman's dormitory isn't lit until 6, and it's barely 5 now. You splash water on your face and feel the shock of it clear the last fog of sleep from your head, and you look at the face in the small piece of polished metal that serves as your mirror. You're a good-looking young man. This is not vanity, it's professional assessment. In this work, appearance is literally part of your job description. The housekeeper told you so explicitly on your first day. You were hired partly because you're tall enough to look impressive in livery, partly because your face is pleasant without being distractingly handsome, and partly because you have the bone structure that looks good in a powdered wig. These are the qualifications for a footman at a house like this. Strength helps. You carry things, heavy things, all day. But the appearance comes first. You know what you look like when they put you in the livery. The deep blue coat with the silver buttons, the white breeches, the white stockings, the powdered wig. You've seen yourself reflected in the polished silver of the dining room, and in the glass of the long mirrors in the entrance hall. You know that you look exactly like what you're supposed to look like, a decorative object in human form, a piece of architecture with legs, what you look like in this partitioned cell at 5 a.m, in your undershirt, face wet, eyes still carrying the weight of a dream you're already forgetting. That person is different. That person is just Thomas. 20 years old, Suffolk, trying to figure out how to survive in a world that has made it very clear it doesn't particularly want people like him to survive in it. You get dressed quickly. The cold encourages efficiency. Your livery is kept immaculate. This isn't personal pride, though there is some of that. It's professional necessity. A footman whose livery is not perfect is a footman who gets remarked upon by the guests, which means getting remarked upon by the household steward, Mr. Fellows, which is the kind of conversation you want to avoid. Mr. Fellows is a small, precise man of 52 who's been in service his entire life, and who has reached through decades of exactness a position of such authority within the household that his disapproval is its own kind of punishment. He has never once raised his voice in your presence. He doesn't need to. The coat goes on. You check the buttons. All present. No tarnish. The ones on the left sleeve still slightly brighter than the ones on the right, because you had to replace one last month and the replacement hasn't quite aged to match. You'll have to do something about that. The breeches are clean, the stockings fresh, the shoes polished. You did them last night before bed because mornings don't have time. The wig goes on last. You hate the wig. Not for aesthetic reasons, though. The white powder does get everywhere, in your collar and on your hands and sometimes in your mouth. You hate it because the wig is not you. The wig is the footman. The Thomas Ashworth who lives in the partitioned cell and wakes before dawn and has thoughts he's not supposed to have. That person goes away when the wig goes on. What remains is a function, a piece of the household machinery. You've learned to find a kind of peace in that. The disappearing into function, the relief of being only what you're supposed to be for 12 hours, and nothing more and nothing less. This is the discipline. This is what every day requires. You step out of the partitioned cell, past the shoes lined up on the rack. You'll collect them on your way back through, and up the narrow stone staircase toward the upper floors of the house. Cavendish House is not a royal palace. Let's be clear about that. It is a private residence, the London home of the Earl of Cavendish, who is a man of considerable wealth, and a man whose connections at court mean that the distinction between a great private house and a minor royal one is mostly administrative. Guests of the royal family come here. Ministers come here. Ambassadors come here. The Prince of Wales has been to dinner at this table 4 times in the last 3 years, and the last time you stood behind the second chair from the left for 3 hours without moving, and heard, in fragments, pieces of a conversation about the succession that you have never repeated to anyone. This is one of the first things you learn in a house like this. You hear things, you cannot help it. You are present when conversations happen. You're in rooms where documents are left out. You're trusted to be invisible, and that trust means that the people you serve sometimes forget completely that you are a human being with memory and ears and the capacity to understand what you're hearing. The second thing you learn is that you must act on absolutely none of it. Not a word, not a whisper, not even a knowing look when you're serving drinks to someone you heard saying something they shouldn't. The third thing you learn is that the same rule applies with double force to everything you know about the other servants. This house runs on discretion. Everyone in it is carrying something, Everyone in it has a version of themselves that exists only in the servants' quarters, below the polished floors and the good candles and the painted ceilings. Everyone has something they are not supposed to be. You're simply carrying something heavier than most. The kitchen is already awake when you pass through. Mrs. Holt, the cook, is a woman of enormous physical presence and surprisingly delicate professional skill, who has been cooking for this household for 11 years and who treats her kitchen like a military commander treats a battlefield. Everything has a position. Everything has a purpose. Deviation from the plan is not a failure of execution, but a failure of character. She's standing at the large central table, her sleeves already rolled to the elbows, directing one of the kitchen maids to do something to a joint of meat that requires gesturing with both hands. She glances at you as you pass. "Shoes," she says. "On my way back." She nods. This is the extent of most of your morning conversations with Mrs. Holt. She has no strong opinion of you either way, which in this environment is roughly equivalent to a glowing endorsement. The servants' hall is filling up now, other footmen arriving, the ladies' maids from upstairs who consider themselves several rungs above you on the internal social ladder and express this through a particular quality of not quite looking at you. The steward's room boy, a child of about 13 named Peter, who is so new to service that he still has the bewildered expression of someone who has just realised that the world doesn't work the way anyone told him it did. And at the far end of the servants' hall, eating a piece of bread, standing up with one hand while reading something with the other, there is James Hartley. This is the part of the story that requires some care. James Hartley is the under-butler. He is 24 years old. He came to this household 3 years before you did, from a family of servants. His father was a butler, his grandfather was a butler. His entire family has been in service so long that service is simply what they are, what their blood understands. He's a man of medium height with dark hair and brown eyes, and hands that are permanently slightly ink-stained from the inventory records he keeps. Because part of an under-butler's job is documentation, keeping track of every bottle of wine in the cellar and every piece of silver in the pantry. He's reading right now a printed sheet of some kind. His lips move slightly when he reads, not because he struggles with words, but because he reads with his whole self, his whole body slightly engaged with the text. You have noticed this about him. You've noticed it the way you've noticed a great many things about James Hartley over the course of the 2 years you have worked in this house. A kind of careful noticing that stays firmly inside your own head and goes no further. He looks up when you enter, nods. Morning. Morning. This is the full extent of how you greet each other. Professional. Correct. 2 men in service who work in the same house and maintain a pleasant, functional, invisible relationship. Except that last Thursday evening in the wine cellar where James had gone to check inventory and you had gone to fetch a bottle of Burgundy that Mr. Fellows needed for the second course of the dinner party. Something happened. James was standing on the small wooden steps they used to reach the upper shelves, reading the labels on the bottles in the 3rd row, and you came in and said his name to let him know you were there, and he turned on the steps and lost his balance slightly, and you stepped forward automatically to steady him, and your hand went to his waist and his hand went to your arm, and you were both very still for a moment that lasted maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4, maybe an entire decade compressed into the space between heartbeats. Then he steadied. You stepped back. He said, 14, second shelf, left side, meaning the Burgundy. You got it. You left. Neither of you has referred to it. But it happened, and the part of you that notices things about James Hartley has been very loud about it ever since. You get your bread from the kitchen table, stand by the window that looks out at the servants' courtyard, and eat it quickly. The courtyard is grey in the early morning light, the cobblestones still wet with last night's rain. A stable boy crossing with a bucket and not looking where he's going, with the particular focused indifference of someone who's been awake since 4 and doesn't have the energy for awareness. Outside these walls, London is waking up. You can hear it even from here. The low rumble of carts on the streets, the distant bell of a church, the sound of vendors beginning their rounds. 500,000 people starting their day. Coachmen and chimney sweeps and lawyers and fishmongers and surgeons and beggars and sailors, and all the vast breathing mechanical organism of the largest city in the world, turning itself over, getting up, getting started. In approximately 400 different places in this city, there are other men like you, getting up this morning, putting on whatever version of a uniform their particular life requires, carrying the particular thing they carry. Most of them are not in houses like this one. Most of them are working men, tailors, clerks, wig makers, coachmen, laundresses, assistants, actors, musicians, men whose invisible lives have found, over the last 20 or 30 years, a particular geography. A set of places in the city where the invisible life is slightly less invisible, where the door you've been trying not to open is, if not exactly standing open, at least slightly ajar. You know these places exist. You know about them the way you know about anything in this city that you're not supposed to know about, through overheard conversations, through careful reading between the lines of pamphlets that circulate through the city's coffee houses, through certain things said and immediately unsaid by certain people at certain moments. You've never been to any of them. You're 20 years old, and you have been in this city for 2 years, and you've never once allowed yourself to go to any of them. But you know where they are, the way a man who has decided not to drink knows exactly which taverns to avoid. Finish your bread. Take a breath. The day is starting. The first footman, whose name is Robert and who has 12 years of service in this household and an expression of permanent mild irritation that you've come to understand is not personal, but simply his face, appears at the door of the servants' hall and announces that the family is calling for breakfast in 45 minutes, and there is a great deal to be done. There is always a great deal to be done. The work of a footman in a house of this size is not one thing. It is 40 things. It is the carrying of coal scuttles up 3 flights of stairs because the upstairs fires need to be built up before the family wakes. It is the laying of the breakfast table, which has to be perfect. Silver polished to mirror clarity, china arranged with military precision, the flowers in the centre vase fresh as of this morning, the toast rack positioned at the correct angle. It is the opening of the heavy curtains in the morning room, which are made of silk damask and weigh approximately as much as you do, and must be gathered just so, or Mrs. Fellows, the housekeeper, will notice and say nothing, but somehow make her noticing felt in the air of the room for the rest of the morning. It is the message carrying, the door opening, the chair pulling, the tray carrying, the standing still for extended periods with your hands at your sides and your face neutral. It is most of all the being seen and being not seen simultaneously, present without being intrusive, useful without being human. This is the real skill of the work, the thing that takes years to learn and that some people simply never acquire. The art of invisible presence. You are good at it. Very good. Mr. Fellows has said so in the oblique way he says things. Your positioning is generally appropriate, Ashworth. This is practically an encomium from Mr. Fellows. The breakfast service goes smoothly. The Earl and Countess take their breakfast in the morning room. Their daughter, Lady Charlotte, who is 16, and in the process of becoming the kind of person that some people call spirited and other people call difficult, takes hers in her room. Their son, Lord George, who is 22 and who has the kind of face that suggests he has recently been up very late and regrets it, comes downstairs late and eats standing up near the window and says almost nothing. You stand, you refill, you clear, you are invisible. Lord George, reaching for the coffee pot that is to your left, looks directly at you for a moment. Actually looks. Not through you, not past you, but at you. Men of his class rarely do this. Usually they look at a point approximately 8 inches to the side of your head, because looking directly at you would require acknowledging that you are a person, which would require a whole social apparatus of acknowledgement. That's simply too much effort before 10 in the morning. But Lord George looks at you. You're new, he says. 2 years, my lord. He pours his own coffee, which is not really how this works, but which he does anyway, with the casual disregard for protocol that marks a man who has spent his whole life within a system and therefore doesn't really believe the system applies to him. Ashworth. Yes, my lord. He nods, as if confirming something to himself, and goes back to looking out the window. You refill the cream pitcher and do not think about what the look meant, because you have learned that thinking about what looks mean is a luxury you cannot afford. Looks mean nothing. Looks are just eyes moving across a room. They do not mean anything specific about you, and they do not mean anything specific about Lord George. And the fact that he has a certain kind of mouth and a certain kind of hands and is approximately 2 inches taller than you and has been present at every royal gathering you've had to work in the last 6 months means absolutely nothing. And you're done thinking about it. Done. The family finishes breakfast. You clear. You carry the silver to the butler's pantry for polishing. You carry the dishes to the scullery. You check with Robert about the afternoon arrangements. There is a supper tonight for 8 guests. Moderate by the household standards, manageable, and the silver needs to be done before 3. The work fills the hours the way water fills a vessel, completely without gaps. This is the mercy of it. This is why you chose this work, though you didn't know at the time that you were choosing it for this reason. In a great house, there is almost never a moment when you are not doing something that is demanded of you. The body is occupied, the hands are busy. The part of your mind that produces the dangerous thoughts has very little oxygen to work with when you're carrying a scuttle of coal up 40 stairs or polishing silver plate for 3 hours at a stretch. The silver polishing happens in the butler's pantry, which is a room about 12 feet square with shelves on 3 walls and a long central table. It smells like the polish, a sharp mineral smell with something almost metallic underneath, and like the wood of the old shelves, and faintly, underneath both of those, like the wine cellar immediately below it. James is there when you arrive, already at the table with a candelabra in front of him, and a polishing cloth in his hand. He does not look up when you come in. You take a place at the other end of the table. You take a set of soup spoons from the rack. You begin to polish. The work is rhythmic. Cloth against silver, the slight resistance of the metal warming under the friction, the polish going from grey smear to clear as you work it in and work it out. Good work, honest work. Your hands understand it. For about 10 minutes, neither of you says anything. Then James says, without looking up from the candelabra, "You went out last Saturday." It's not a question exactly. More an observation. You have a Saturday evening free every 2 weeks, and you did go out last Saturday. You went to the Blue Post Tavern near Charing Cross and drank 1 ale and came home before 10, which is exactly the kind of Saturday evening that requires no explanation. The Blue Post, you say, with Robert and Edward. The polishing cloth moves around a curve of the candelabra. Nowhere else? Where else would I go? He's quiet for a moment. He sets down the candelabra and picks up a candlestick. You watch his hands work without meaning to watch them. I heard something, he says, last week, in the house. This is how information travels in a household like this. Not through direct conversation, but through these oblique approaches, information offered without quite being offered. The receiver able to accept or decline without either party having committed to anything. What did you hear? There's a man who used to work here, Samuel Greer. He was second footman before you. He left about 2 years ago. You know the name. You've heard it mentioned once or twice. You don't know anything specific about the man. What about him? James looks up. His eyes are very steady when they find yours. He has the kind of eyes that are comfortable with silence. He was taken up last month by the constables. You wait. Not for theft, James says. Not for drunk and disorderly. The room is very quiet. The faint smell of polish and wine and old wood. The sound of distant activity from the kitchen 2 rooms away. There was a place, James continues carefully, in Moorfields, a particular kind of house. Constables raided it. You keep your hands moving. Polish, buff, polish, buff. The rhythm is important. Keep your hands moving and your face neutral and don't let anything show. They took up about 30 men, James says. Samuel was one of them. Where is he now? Newgate. You look down at the spoon in your hands, your own face in the silver, distorted, small. Newgate Prison. The most feared prison in London, a building so old and so foul and so deeply associated with death that its name has become its own category of nightmare. What will happen to him? James is quiet for a moment. Then, the pillory, probably. If he's unlucky. More than that. The law is very specific about more than that. The Buggery Act of 1533, 200 years old and still on the books, still applied, still capable of putting a rope around a man's neck for the particular crime of being what Samuel Greer is. What James is carefully implying Samuel Greer is, what you have not said and will not say out loud in this room. Why are you telling me this, you ask? He looks at you. He looks at you the way he looked at you in the wine cellar, with the full weight of his actual attention. Not the professional attention, but the real attention that exists beneath it. Because you should know, he says, because things are not. He stops, starts again. There's been 3 raids in the last 6 months, 3 different places. The constables are being thorough. Someone has given them information. An informer. You understand what he's telling you. There is someone in the network of these places, these particular houses and meeting rooms and back parlours, who is providing information to the authorities, names, locations, faces. An informer working through fear or through money, or through the strange human impulse to drag others down into whatever pit you're already in. You set down the soup spoon, pick up another. Your hands are completely steady, which surprises you, because inside the steadiness there is something that is very much the opposite of steady. I've never been to any of those places, you say. I know, James says. I know you haven't. The way he says it, the flat certainty of it. He knows. He has known. He has watched you for 2 years with the same careful attention you've been turning on him, and he has reached the same conclusions And he has said nothing, and you have said nothing. And the thing in the wine cellar with the 4 seconds and the steadying hands was the first moment when the not saying had slightly cracked. How long have you known? You ask. He almost smiles. It's a careful thing, that almost smile. How long have I known what exactly? Don't, you say. Your voice is steady. You're proud of the steadiness. We don't need to be careful with each other right now. Not in here. He's quiet for a long moment. He sets down the candlestick. He looks at you across the length of the table with all those polished silver pieces between you, each one of them reflecting the dim light of the single candle they're using so as not to waste the household supply. About you, he says. About 2 years. About myself. Most of my life, I suppose. Though there were a few years where I was quite successfully arguing the other side. You breathe. There is something about hearing someone else say it, even in this careful, oblique way, that loosens something in your chest that has been very tight for a very long time. Samuel Greer, you say. Did you know him? Yes. Was he? Yes. You pick up the next spoon, the rhythm again, the safe, occupied hands. Thank you for telling me, you say, about the raids. Of course. You polish in silence for another few minutes, the sound of the cloth on the silver, the distant kitchen, the house above you living its normal life of wealth and meals and family and conversation, completely unaware of what is happening in the butler's pantry directly below. Then James says very quietly, "There's another place, one that hasn't been touched, in Covent Garden. A man named Mother Adams runs it. That's not his real name. That's what people call him. It's been there for 8 years. 8 years without a raid. You don't say anything." "I'm not suggesting you go," James says. "I'm simply telling you it exists." "Why?" A pause. They almost smile again. "Because everyone should know that places exist where they don't have to..." He stops. The professional discretion so deeply ingrained that even now in this room with you, it takes effort to override. Where they don't have to be what the upstairs requires them to be. You finish the spoon, set it down, pick up the next. "We should get back to this," you say. "Yes." And you do. You polish the rest of the silver service in near silence, and by the time you're done, the afternoon has arrived and the house is filling up with pre-supper preparations, and the moment in the butler's pantry becomes one of those things that happened and didn't happen simultaneously, that you will carry with you into the rest of the day, and the rest of the evening, and the rest of the sleepless hours of the night. But it stays with you, the information, like a splinter, working its way in. Mother Adams, Covent Garden, 8 years without a raid. The supper that evening is 8 guests, as anticipated. A mixed company, 2 members of Parliament, a general whose name you recognise from the coffee-house pamphlets, the wife of a colonial merchant who has the particular manner of a woman who has been to places that have changed her perspective and has found, on returning, that the drawing-rooms of London are slightly smaller than she remembered, a music teacher who seems faintly astonished to be there, and 2 young men whose connection to the household is unclear to you, and whose function at the dinner table is apparently to be handsome and agreeable. You stand, you serve, you refill, you are invisible. Lord George is at the dinner. He drinks more than is perhaps advisable, and becomes more animated as the evening progresses. He argues at one point quite passionately with one of the MPs about the nature of English liberty, the particular argument that this country believes itself to be the home of freedom, while maintaining laws that are not, he says, and he says it loudly enough that you hear it clearly from your position behind the 3rd chair from the left, not. He stops himself. His eyes move around the table, land briefly on you. Not entirely consistent with that claim, he finishes. The MP makes a noise that suggests this is the opinion of a young man who has not thought carefully about which liberties are worth protecting. Lord George takes a large drink of wine and does not pursue the argument further. You refill his glass. Your face is neutral. It has been neutral for your entire career. The evening ends, the guests leave, the family retires. The clearing begins, which takes another 2 hours, because 8 guests produce an enormous quantity of dishes and glasses, and a wine cellar's worth of empty bottles, and a great deal of candle wax that has dripped onto the tablecloth, and a centrepiece of flowers that has shed petals across the linen. All of this must be dealt with. By 11, you are done. By 11:15, you're in the partitioned cell. Edward is already asleep. Through the thin wood, you can hear his breathing. You lie down on the mattress and stare up at the ceiling. You can't actually see and think about Samuel Greer in Newgate Prison. You have never met Samuel Greer. You have only his name, James's careful voice, and the specific weight of the word Newgate. But you find yourself thinking about him with an intimacy that surprises you. What he looked like in this livery. Whether he stood where you stand, behind the same chairs, serving the same silver to a succession of faces that looked through him. Whether he had a partitioned cell of his own, or a room he shared with someone. Whether on the evenings when he was not required he made the decision that you have never made, walked the streets toward Moorfields, found the particular door, what the door felt like, opening. And then the other part, the raid, the constables, the names being taken, the particular quality of humiliation that comes with being arrested for the crime of who you are, stripped of the livery and the function and the invisibility, made suddenly and catastrophically visible in the worst possible way. The pillory, at the very least. You know what the pillory means. You've seen it. There's a pillory at Charing Cross within walking distance of this house. You've walked past it. You've seen the small crowd that gathers on pillory days. Most people in the pillory have committed crimes that generate a certain degree of sympathy from the crowd. Forgery, some kinds of fraud, things people understand even if they don't approve. The men convicted under the Buggery Act don't get sympathy from the crowd. They get something else entirely. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your eyelids, the city goes on. The night watchman calls the hour somewhere outside. A dog barks once and then stops. The faint, eternal hum of London at night. 500,000 people breathing, dreaming, getting up, going out, lying awake. Somewhere in Covent Garden, in a house you don't know the address of, run by a man known as Mother Adams, other men like you are, right now, in rooms that exist outside the normal rules of the world, speaking in their own voices, using their own faces, being visible in the specific way that your life, as it is currently arranged, never allows. 8 years without a raid. Sleep doesn't come for a long time. The next morning is a Thursday, and Thursdays have a particular rhythm in this household because Thursday is the day that Mr. Fellows reviews the accounts, and requires all staff to account for the previous week's expenditures from their individual household budgets. This means that Thursday mornings have a slightly anxious quality in the servants' hall, everyone mentally rehearsing their figures, hoping they haven't overspent on anything that will require an explanation. You have not overspent. You are careful with money the way you're careful with everything, methodically, without excess, with an eye always on the potential for things to go wrong. You're carrying a scuttle of coal up the main staircase. The secondary main staircase, which is the one servants use when carrying things that shouldn't be seen on the primary main staircase. When Lord George appears at the top, he's dressed for going out, which means boots and a good coat and a hat that's been brushed recently. He's carrying gloves and looking at the gloves with mild dissatisfaction. He sees you coming up the stairs with a coal scuttle and moves to one side to let you pass. This is more courtesy than most members of the family extend. Usually they simply wait, forcing you to make the manoeuvre around them with the heavy coal scuttle, which is the kind of physical negotiation that requires training and balance, and the ability to smile pleasantly while your arms are shaking. "Ashworth," he says. You stop. "My lord?" He's still looking at his gloves. "How long have you been with the household?" 2 years, my lord. Before that, an apprenticeship with a draper, my lord, on Cheapside. He puts the gloves on, not satisfied with them, but apparently willing to accept them. "You're from Suffolk originally." It's not a question. He has clearly read your reference letter, or had someone read it to him, or simply remembered something from a previous conversation you can't recall having with him. The aristocracy do this occasionally. They appear not to know you exist, and then they produce a fact about you that demonstrates they have been paying a great deal more attention than they seemed. "Yes, my lord. Weathersham. A very small village." "Yes, my lord." He looks up. The gloves are on now, and he is looking at you with a particular directness he showed at breakfast, that unsettling actual attention. Up close you can see that he's tired, not the tiredness of last night's wine, which is usual for him, but something older, a tiredness that lives behind the eyes. "Is it?" He stops, looks at the gloves again. "Never mind, carry on." He goes down the stairs past you. His shoulder nearly brushes yours as he passes. Nearly. You carry the coal scuttle to the upstairs study and build the fire and leave, and do not think about Lord George's shoulder nearly brushing yours, because you are very good at not thinking about things. The week moves. The days have the rhythm of all days in service. Early, full, physical, exhausting. You rise before dawn and work until the household sleeps, and the hours in between are filled entirely with the maintenance of other people's comfort. But Thursday evening something shifts. Mr. Fellows has given you Saturday evening free, your regular one every 2 weeks. Saturday is 3 days away. You're standing in the corridor outside the butler's pantry, waiting to help James carry a case of wine up from the cellar, and you are aware, very specifically and uncomfortably aware, that you're thinking about Mother Adams in Covent Garden. Not going, just thinking about going. There is a difference. There is a meaningful difference between the thought and the action, and the thought is not illegal. The thought is just a thought, and you have been having this thought for 3 days now, and you cannot make it stop. James appears at the top of the cellar stairs with the first case. You take the other end. Saturday, you say. He doesn't look at you. His end of the case is perfectly steady. Saturday, you say again, very quietly. A moment, the weight of the wine case between you. Covent Garden, he says, not confirming, not declining, just saying the word, putting it in the air between you. Have you been? Another moment. Once, a year ago. He begins moving toward the dining room. You move with him. The case of wine between you, linking you, making it easier and more difficult simultaneously to have this conversation. It was... He stops. What? You set the case down together inside the dining room door. He straightens. His hands go to his collar, adjusting something that doesn't need adjusting. Safe, he says finally. It was safe. You look at him. He's looking at the wall above the door. His profile is very steady and very controlled, and you recognize the control because it matches your own. "Come on Saturday," he says. "I'll show you where it is." You don't answer right away. You think about Samuel Greer in Newgate. You think about 3 raids in 6 months. You think about the informer, whoever they are, whoever is selling names and faces to the constables. You think about 8 years without a raid. "All right," you say. He nods once. Then he goes back to the cellar for the next case. Saturday arrives the way Saturdays always do in this household, slightly slower than the rest of the week, because Saturday morning is the deep cleaning morning, and deep cleaning requires a particular quality of sustained, methodical attention that has a calming effect on time. You're on your knees in the entrance hall at 9 in the morning with a cloth and a bucket, cleaning the marble floor with the long circular strokes that Mr. Fellows insists upon, and the rhythm of it is almost meditative. The marble is cold under your knees. The cloth is coarser than you'd like. The marble cleaning solution smells of vinegar and something herbal. Lemon, you think, and something else you can't identify. The floor is black and white squares laid in a pattern that, when you're kneeling this close to it, becomes abstract, just geometry, just shape. You're aware of your hands on the cloth, the slight sting of the cleaning solution where you have a small cut on your right index finger, the way your arms move, pushing, circular, the smell of the solution cutting through the usual morning smell of the entrance hall, which is a smell of cold stone and the lingering ghost of last night's candles. Edward is cleaning the far side of the hall. He is humming something under his breath very quietly. He does this often. He's not entirely aware that he does it. "Are you going out tonight?" Edward asks. He's not looking at you. He's focused on a section of floor near the front door that apparently requires his full attention. Later, yes. To the Blue Post? Probably not, just walking. He looks up at this because walking as an evening activity in November, which it very nearly is, does not entirely make sense as an answer. But Edward is 17 and not particularly suspicious, and his attention returns to the floor. "Robert says there's a good card game on in the kitchen tonight," he says. "Tell Robert I might be in later." You won't be in later, but the might is a useful hedge. The afternoon is spent on the preparations for what Mr. Fellows refers to as an informal gathering, which means 12 people for cards and supper rather than the formal dinner service, which means different arrangements, lighter silver, the card tables set up in the drawing room. You carry the tables from storage and set them up with the particular care they require. The legs of these card tables have a tendency to fold in unexpectedly if the catches aren't properly secured, and an unexpectedly collapsing card table is the kind of event that generates exactly the kind of attention you don't want. By 6 o'clock the gathering is underway. You're pouring wine for a woman who is losing spectacularly at loo, and who seems to be finding this funnier than distressing, when you see, from across the room, Lord George at one of the other tables. He's playing with what appears to be focused competence. His cards are held close to his chest. His expression gives nothing away. He looks up once, catches your eye across the room. Something happens in his expression, something very small and very controlled. You refill the losing woman's glass and move away. By 9, the gathering is fully underway and doesn't require your specific presence. Only the general presence of someone to refill drinks and bring more candles as the evening draws down. You find Robert and tell him you're taking your free time now. He nods, barely listening, focused on something that's apparently going wrong in the kitchen. You go downstairs, change out of your livery into your own clothes, the plain brown coat, the dark breeches, the shoes without buckles, and become, as much as possible, an ordinary young man rather than a footman. James is waiting in the servants' courtyard. He's also in his own clothes, which you've rarely seen him in, and the effect is strange. He looks younger, somehow, and less formal, and more like the person he actually is rather than the professional function he performs. He looks at you when you come out, takes in the brown coat, nods as if approving. "Ready?" he says. "Yes." You go out the servants' gate into the side street and turn north toward Covent Garden. London at 9 on a Saturday evening in late October is a particular kind of beast. The respectable world is still going. Dinner parties, card games, the theatre. But the other world is also fully awake. The nighttime world that runs on different rules and operates in the spaces between the respectable. Taverns are busy, gin shops are busy. The streets around Covent Garden, which is both the city's main fruit and vegetable market and one of its principal entertainment districts, are thick with people. Theatre-goers, prostitutes, street sellers still working the evening crowds, chairmen waiting for passengers, link boys offering torches, men and women moving in pairs and groups through the lamp-lit darkness. The lamps help, but not as much as they should. The oil lamps on their iron brackets illuminate pools of yellow-orange light at intervals, but the spaces between them are genuine darkness, and the narrow courts and alleys that branch off the main streets are darker still. James walks with the purpose of someone who knows exactly where he's going, which he does, and you keep pace with him, close enough to benefit from his navigation, but not so close that anyone would read anything particular into your proximity. Covent Garden itself is a large open piazza surrounded by arcaded buildings, the whole thing designed by Inigo Jones 100 years ago to be an elegant public square. What it has become is something considerably less elegant. The fruit and vegetable stalls are packed up for the evening, but the ground is still littered with the detritus of the day's market, rotting cabbage leaves and fruit reens and the smell of wet stone and old produce. The arcades on the south side contain, during the day, shops and coffee houses. In the evening they host a different trade entirely. Women standing in doorways, the particular kind of business conducted in half-lit doorways. You and James walk through the piazza without stopping, past the church of St. Paul's with its wide portico where a man is sleeping in the shelter of the columns, past a group of young men who are too loud and too drunk and too prosperous to be any threat, around the corner into one of the streets leading north from the market. Here the character of the neighbourhood changes slightly. Still busy, still London in full evening mode, but quieter, narrower. The houses here are older, a few of them actually leaning, the upper floors projecting slightly over the street in a way that makes the narrow strip of sky above a ragged, irregular thing. James stops in front of a door. It's set slightly below street level, 3 steps down from the pavement, and the door is painted a dark green that might be any colour in this light. There's no sign, no indication of what's inside, just a door with a small lion's head knocker. "You don't have to go in," he says. His voice is quiet and completely even. "I know. If anyone stops us, we came here to use the privy." "There's a privy." "Probably not, but it's a reason." You look at the door, the green paint, the lion's head, 3 steps down. 8 years, you say. 8 years, he confirms. You go down the steps. James knocks. A particular knock. 3, then 2, then 1. A pattern. The door opens. The man who opens it is tall, in his 40s, with a face that has been weathered by years of making precisely this calculation. whether the person on the other side of the door is someone who should be allowed in. He looks at James, a recognition. He looks at you, a question. He's with me, James says. The man steps back. You go in. The first thing is the warmth. After the cold of the October night, the warmth of the room hits you like something physical, a change in pressure. The room is heated by 2 fires, one at each end, and the heat they produce combined with the heat of the bodies in the room creates an atmosphere that is dense and close and alive. The second thing is the sound. There is music, a fiddle somewhere at the back of the room, playing something lively that you don't recognize. And over it and under it and through it, there are voices, a great many voices, the particular sound of people in conversation without pretense, without the careful managing of tone and content that happens in every room you usually spend your time in. The third thing is the light. Candles on every surface. More candles than you would expect in a room this size, and the effect is a warmth of light to match the warmth of air. The room is medium-sized, not large. There are perhaps 40 people in it, though more might be in the rooms beyond, and the space at this level of occupancy is comfortably full. The furnishings are plain. Wooden tables, chairs, benches along the walls. There's nothing here that would give the place away to a casual observer. It looks like any one of 100 tavern backrooms in London, but it isn't any one of 100 tavern backrooms. The men in it. You stand just inside the door and you look, and the looking takes a moment to adjust to. The way your eyes have to adjust when you come in from darkness to light. Except it's the reverse. It's not the light you're adjusting to, but the content, the information, what you're seeing. Men talking to men. Not the way men talk in taverns, with the constant slight performance of masculinity that you've observed in every public space you've been in. The careful management of tone and body language that keeps the social machinery running smoothly. These conversations are different, relaxed in a way that real conversations are relaxed, not performed for any purpose except the conversation itself. 2 men near the fire with their heads close together, speaking quietly, occasionally laughing. A man at one of the tables alone with a cup in front of him, watching the room with an expression that is not loneliness, but something closer to contentment. Near the musicians, a man of about your age who is dancing alone in a small space he's cleared, not performing for anyone, but simply moving to the music with the particular freedom of a person who, for this moment, is not being watched by anyone who cares. You breathe. You've been holding your breath in some sense for 2 years, or possibly for 20 years, depending on when you start counting, and the release of it is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't notice from the outside, but inside something that has been clenched unclenches. Something that has been very still begins, very slightly, to move. James is watching you. His expression is careful. "All right," he says. "Yes," you say. "I think so." "Yes." He leads you to the bar at the side of the room where a young man pours ale with practised efficiency and takes a penny without comment. You take the cup, you drink. The ale is decent, better than the Blue Post actually, and the cup is warm from the fire nearby. "First time," James says. It's not a question. "Yes." It gets easier, he says, and there's something in his voice that suggests he's quoting someone, some earlier version of himself being told the same thing. You stop waiting for something to happen. You stop waiting for the door to come in. The door. You think about Samuel Greer in Newgate. You think about the constables. You think about the informer. How often do you come? Once a month, sometimes less. And it's always been safe? So far, he drinks. Mother Adams is careful. The man at the door is careful. Nobody discusses where they work or their full name. You're the first person from the house I've ever brought here. The weight of that, the trust of it. Why did you bring me? He's quiet for a moment. He is looking at the room, at the people in it, with an expression you haven't seen from him before, an expression that is simply his face without the professional overlay. Because I've been watching you for 2 years, he says. Be very careful and very alone, and I thought that was probably sufficient. You look at him. He looks at you. The thing from the wine cellar is back. The 4 seconds. The weight of actual attention. Sufficient, you repeat. Quite long enough, he agrees. The fiddle starts a new song. The man near the musicians continues to dance. The 2 men by the fire are laughing at something. You stay for an hour. You don't speak to anyone except James. You watch. You listen. You learn the room the way you've learned every room you've been responsible for in the last 2 years. Its dimensions, its exits, its habits of sound. Where the door is, how many steps to the street. But you also let yourself have the thing that the room is offering. The possibility of being in a space where your face doesn't have to do the work of concealment. Where the particular discipline you've been practicing every day for years is, for this hour, suspended. You think about the people in this room, who they are outside it. The man near the fire is dressed like a craftsman, a good craftsman, skilled work to judge by his coat. The dancing man looks like a clerk. There's an older man in a good coat who might be a physician or a lawyer or a successful merchant. There's a very young man, younger than you, who looks like he arrived here 20 minutes ago and is having the same experience you are having. There are men here who, tomorrow morning, will put on whatever version of a coat their life requires and go back to being invisible in the particular way their life demands. They will be husbands, fathers, masters of apprentices, men of business. They will carry the thing they carry in the silence and the discipline of people who have understood, without anyone telling them, that the carrying must be done silently or not done at all. And in this room, one night at a time, they put it down. You leave before 11. James walks back with you through the quiet streets. The market piazza is emptier now, the theatrical crowd mostly dispersed, the night watchman making his rounds. The cold has deepened since you went in. Your breath comes out in small clouds. You don't speak much on the walk back. You're both aware that you're crossing back into the territory of the other life, the one that requires the discipline, and the transition requires a certain amount of mental preparation. At the servants' gate, James stops. "Thank you," you say, "for bringing me." "Of course." He puts his hand on the gate latch, pauses. "Thomas." It's the first time he's used your name, not Ashworth, which is the professional address, not the oblique "you" that your conversations have dealt in. Your name. "I need you to understand," he says, his voice very low and very careful, "that what happened tonight, what we discussed, none of it." "I know," you say. "It's not that I don't—" He stops, starts again. "It's simply that this is London in 1727, and we work in a household where 2 MPs came to dinner last week, and the risk—" "I know," you say again. "James, I know." He looks at you. The half-dark of the servants' entrance, the cold. "Go inside," he says. "It's cold." You go inside. You climb the stairs to the partitioned cell. Edward is asleep. You lie down on your mattress and look at the ceiling you can't see and think about the room in Covent Garden. The warmth of it, the sound of the fiddle, the man dancing, and you think about James saying your name. You sleep better than you have in months. The next 2 weeks pass in the particular way that time passes in service, quickly in the aggregate, slowly in each individual day. The house moves through its seasonal rhythm. The Earl and Countess have an engagement every evening. Lord George goes out in the evenings and comes back late and occasionally slightly worse for wear. Lady Charlotte is in the middle of something involving a young man that is clearly romantic and clearly not approved of by her parents, and that everyone in the servants' hall knows about and no one discusses. You carry coal and polish silver and stand behind chairs and refill glasses and are invisible and competent and reliable and exactly what you are hired to be. But something is different now. Not in your work, which remains the same, not in your face, which remains controlled, but in the internal weather, in the private rooms of yourself that no one else has access to. Something has shifted. The discipline is the same, the caution is the same, but the thing that the caution was protecting has a slightly different quality now. Before, it was protecting a void, an absence, a thing that existed only in the negative, as the thing you were not and the life you were not living. Now it's protecting something that exists, something that has been in a room with other people who exist, something that heard its own name said in a particular way by a person it has been carefully not noticing for 2 years. This is both better and worse than the void. James and you continue to work together as you always have. Professional, correct. The conversations are the same. The silver polishing sessions are the same. The inventory checks in the wine cellar are the same. Neither of you refers to Saturday evening. Both of you know it happened. The knowledge is there in the room with you, quiet, taking up space. What you notice is this, that James, who has always been precise and controlled and professionally perfect, is occasionally imprecise now. He reaches for the inventory ledger, and his hand knocks something else off the shelf. He answers a question from Mr. Fellows 1 second too slow, as if his attention was somewhere else. In the servants' hall at supper, he once looks across the table at you with an expression that lasts slightly longer than it should, and which he terminates by looking at his plate. These are very small imprecisions, invisible to anyone not watching closely. You are watching closely. You are watching closely and you are imprecise yourself. You drop a glass during dinner service. You catch it before it falls and it makes no sound, but you feel the catch in your chest, the cold knowledge of how close. You overfill a wine glass by a fraction and have to quietly remove it and replace it before anyone notices. You stand behind the third chair from the left during a formal dinner, and you are thinking about James's hands on the inventory ledger and the half-dark of the servants' gate, and you have to bring yourself back with a specific conscious effort that you can feel happening, a tightening, a refocusing. This is dangerous. In a way that's different from the danger of the raids, different from the danger of Newgate, but related to it. If you lose the discipline, if the invisible professional becomes slightly less invisible, people notice. People in this house are professionally attentive to detail. If someone notices, questions get asked. Questions are the beginning of a process you cannot afford to begin. You need to be careful. You are always careful. You will be careful now in a new way, a more specific way, a way that involves the specific problem of James Hartley, and the wine cellar, and the room in Covent Garden, and your own name said in a particular voice. You will be careful. This is what you tell yourself. Then Lord George stops you in the corridor. It's late afternoon, a Tuesday, about 3 weeks after the Saturday evening. You're carrying a wrapped package for the housekeeper. Correspondence that needs to go to the merchant in the Strand, a routine errand. Lord George is coming down the corridor from the other direction, which means you'll pass each other in the narrower section near the library door. He stops before you do. Ashworth. You stop. My lord. He looks at you, not through you, at you. The direct look that you've catalogued, that you know, that you've been very carefully not attaching any meaning to. I was at the theatre last night, he says. This is not, on the surface, a statement that requires any response from you. They were doing a new play, something by a fellow called Fielding. You wait. There were some themes, Lord George says, in the play that I found. I was thinking about them this morning. A pause. He is looking at his own hands, which are in his pockets, which is not an elegant posture for a man of his station, but which gives him something to do with his attention that isn't looking at you. Themes concerning certain English laws, their consistency with. He stops. My lord, you say carefully, I have to deliver this package by 4. He looks up. Something flickers in his expression. Frustration, maybe, or relief. Hard to tell. Of course, he says. Carry on. You carry on. You walk down the corridor and around the corner, and you keep your pace completely even and your breathing completely even, and you do not think about what Lord George was or was not beginning to say. You do not think about it. You deliver the package, you come back, you do your work. You polish the silver in the butler's pantry, and this time James is not there. He's in the cellar doing inventory, and you polish alone with only the smell of the polish and the faint smell of wine from below, and the sound of your own breathing. 3 weeks after the first Saturday, it's your Saturday again. James finds you in the corridor in the morning, a moment between tasks. Tonight, he says, yes, that's all. That evening, you go again. The walk through Covent Garden, the 3 steps down, the particular knock, the warmth and the light and the sound of voices that aren't managing themselves for an audience. This time, you speak to people. Not many, not at length. But there is a man who comes over and introduces himself as William. Just William, no family name, and who is a typesetter at a printing house in Fleet Street, and who has been coming here for 3 years, and who has a quality of warmth that makes conversation easy. There is another man, older, who says his name is Francis, and who drinks his ale slowly and asks you, with genuine interest, where you're from. You tell him Suffolk. He tells you he's from Somerset. He has an accent that still carries the West Country in it, softened by years in London but not eliminated. First time, he asks. Second, you say. He nods. He has a lined face and steady eyes. Gets less strange, he says. The second time is harder than the first, actually. The first time you're too surprised to be frightened. The second time you know exactly what you're doing and you do it anyway. Is that meant to be reassuring? He almost smiles. It's meant to be accurate. You like him. James is at the other end of the room, talking with someone you haven't seen before. A man about his age with a serious face and an ink stain on his collar that matches James's own perpetual one. They're deep in conversation. James's face, you notice, is different here than it is in the household. Less controlled. More like a face that belongs to a person rather than a professional function. He looks up once, finds you across the room, gives you the almost smile. You look away. William the typesetter is telling you something about a broadsheet that his printing house produced recently. Something about parliamentary proceedings. And you listen with genuine interest because broadsheets are how you know what's happening in this city, and William, as someone who physically sets the type for them, has a particular kind of knowledge about what's true and what's shaped. The Greer case, he says, and your attention sharpens. What about it? William sets down his cup. looks at you carefully. You knew him. I know of him. He worked in a household I work in. Did he? Not a question. He picks up his cup again, drinks. The trial is in 2 weeks. The constable who made the arrest is one of the ones they use for these cases specifically, a man named Archer. He's been making these cases for 3 years. Archer. He has an informer. Nobody knows who it is. Someone who goes to these places and then goes and talks to Archer afterward. His voice is very even, purely informational. 3 raids in 6 months. They knew exactly where to go and when. This place he doesn't know about, William says. Mother Adams has been here for 8 years. He knows people. When Archer gets information, somehow the information doesn't include this address. He pauses. But it might. Someday. Someone could follow someone here. Someone could decide the price of information is worth the cost. You think about the men in this room, the craftsman by the fire, Francis from Somerset with his lined face, the young man who arrived looking bewildered and is now, 2 hours later, laughing at something with a man across the table. Who would do it? Who would walk out of this room and find Constable Archer and give him an address? Fear does strange things to people. You know this. You've seen it in the house. The way that the threat of Mr. Fellowes' disapproval can make a normally honest person bend the truth about a broken piece of china. The way that the possibility of being dismissed can make a person say things they'd never say otherwise. Fear in a much larger register, the fear of Newgate and the pillory and the rope, must do proportionally stranger things. What happens to Samuel Greer, you ask? The pillory, certainly. Then they're likely to press for the maximum, to make an example. The maximum. Who are they? There are people who consider it important, William says carefully, to be seen as working against this. Clergy, certain justices, politicians who want to demonstrate a particular kind of moral seriousness. He drinks. Elections next year. Elections. Of course. The machinery of public morality running on schedule, requiring its periodic demonstrations of vigour. Samuel Greer in the dock, a young man who worked as a footman and went to the wrong place at the wrong time, becomes a piece of political theatre. You stay 2 hours. You walk home with James. William told me about the trial, you say. About Archer. James is quiet for a few steps. The cobblestones under your feet, the damp cold of the night, the distant sound of the city continuing its business. I know about Archer, he says. Is this place safe? I believe so. You believe so. Nothing is certain. He glances at you. Nothing has been certain since... He stops. Since birth, you finish. He almost smiles. Roughly, yes. You walk in silence for a moment. Your shoulder is close to his shoulder. In the dark, with the houses pressing close on both sides of the street, there's no one to observe whether shoulders are touching or not touching. James, you say. Yes. In the wine cellar. Yes. What happened there? Yes. You're both quiet. I need to say this once, you say, and then you can tell me to never say it again, and I won't. But I need to say it once, because I have been extremely careful for 2 years, and it turns out that care has limits, and I think I've reached them. He is very still beside you, not pulling away, not moving closer, simply still, waiting. I have thought about you, you say, every day for 2 years, and the thinking has not stopped, and the wine cellar was the most significant thing that has happened to me since I arrived in London, and I understand completely the risk and the impossibility and the requirement of discretion, and I'm not asking for anything except to have said it once. A long pause. Once, he says, his voice very quiet. Once. Another pause. "I have thought about you," he says, "for approximately 22 months, give or take. You walk, the servants' gate, the cold courtyard, the smell of the kitchen and the coal smoke and the stone. Good night," he says. "Good night. You go in. You don't sleep at all." November arrives, and with it the particular quality of London winter that is not the clear, cold winter of the countryside, but something more complicated, more toxic. A cold mixed with coal smoke that makes the air itself feel aggressive, that settles into the buildings and the lungs and the skin. The fogs come in from the river, and the city generates its own fogs on top of them, layers of weather and pollution that turn the light a particular shade of yellow-grey that you only see in London in winter, a colour that doesn't exist in nature, that is entirely the product of a million fires burning at once. In the house, the fires are kept roaring. In the family's rooms, in the drawing rooms and dining room and Lord George's study, the fires are coal and wood and the temperature is aggressively comfortable. Down in the servants' quarters, the fire is coal and smaller, and the temperature is something more modest. Not cold enough to be a hardship exactly, but cold enough to remind you that your comfort is not the building's first priority. You wear an extra layer under your livery, a knitted undershirt that belongs to you properly, bought with your own money, that adds a degree of warmth under the white linen and the blue coat. It's invisible from outside, which is the point. In your work, everything personal is invisible from outside. Everything you actually are is worn close to the skin, under the official surface. You think about this sometimes, the structure of it, the way it has organized your entire relationship with your own self, the public self, outward-facing, precise, professional, the private self pushed so far inward that you sometimes lose track of it entirely, have to consciously go looking for it, find it there, still present, still the same person, unchanged by the pressure of the performance. It hasn't been changed. You check. It's still there. Thomas Ashworth from Weathersham, 20 years old, Suffolk. Still, to his own considerable surprise, intact. The trial of Samuel Greer takes place on a Wednesday in the third week of November. You know this because William the typesetter tells you about it. You've exchanged messages through the particular network of written notes passed between certain people that James has explained to you. Nothing compromising in writing, nothing with names, but notes that communicate enough to maintain a thread of information. You are not at the trial. You could not be at the trial. You are standing behind the second chair from the left during a dinner for 9 people, and you are invisible, and the people around the table are talking about the weather and a new play at Drury Lane and the current price of certain commodities. But you know it is happening. You carry it with you through the dinner service, through the clearing, through the evening's work. That night, in your partitioned cell, you think about what William told you about the evidence, about Constable Archer and the informer, about the 30 men taken in the Moorfields raid, about the fact that one of them, Samuel Greer, worked in this house, stood in these corridors, carried coal up these stairs, polished these silver spoons. Who gave Archer the address of the Moorfields house? The question has no answer you can access. The informer is invisible in the same way you're invisible, present, functional, undetectable until the specific moment of action. The next Saturday's news, brought to you by William in the form of a carefully vague note. Greer sentenced to the pillory and 6 months in Newgate. The maximum charge not pressed on this occasion, due to what William calls mitigating circumstances, which he does not elaborate on. The 6 months in Newgate is its own category of horror, as anyone who knows anything about Newgate understands, but it is not the rope. This is, in the particular mathematics of this situation, something close to luck. In December, something else happens. You're in the library, the family's library, a room you're only ever in when you're carrying something to or from it, replacing a set of books that were lent to a guest and have been returned. The returned books go on the table near the window. Lord George or the Earl will reshelve them. Your job is only to put them on the table. Lord George is in the library when you arrive. He is sitting in one of the leather chairs near the fire with a book open in his lap, and he looks up when you come in. "Just returning these, my lord," you say. "Of course." He watches you cross to the table, place the books, turn to leave. "Ashworth." You stop. "Sit down." This is not, under any normal circumstances, a request that a footman receives. You stand for a moment, not precisely confused, but needing to pass the situation before responding. "I don't think," you begin. "I know it's not usual," he says. "Sit down anyway." You look at him. He's looking at you with an expression that is neither the professional blankness of the master and servant relationship, nor the oblique, careful attention he's been aiming at you for months. It's something else, direct, slightly resigned. You sit in the chair across from him, because he's asked you to, and because refusing a direct request from the son of your employer is its own kind of risk. He looks at you for a moment. Then he closes his book. "I'm going to say something," he says, "that I would like to remain between us." "My lord?" "Let me finish." Not imperious, weary. "I am aware that this is not a normal conversation. I'm aware that you have no reason to trust me and a great many reasons not to. I'm asking you to extend some latitude on the grounds that—" He stops, takes a breath. "On the grounds that I am in the process of becoming a person I'm not sure I want to be, and I don't have anyone else to speak to." The fire crackles. The library is warm, warmly lit, lined with books that represent accumulated wealth as much as accumulated knowledge. You sit very still. "There's a man," Lord George says, looking at the fire rather than at you, "whom I've known for 2 years, a man whose family my family does business with. We have been friends." The word carefully neutral, its careful neutrality indicating exactly the opposite. "We have been friends, and it has recently become clear to me that friendship is not an accurate description of what is happening, and I don't know what to do with that." You wait. "He's 23, Lord George says. I'm 22. We're both sons of men who own things. We both understand perfectly well what is and is not possible in this world." He pauses. "We have suggested that what is and is not possible might be more flexible than I've been treating it. My lord, you're going to tell me to get back to work, that you can't help me with this, that it's not appropriate. All of those things are true, you say." "I know." He looks at you. His face is surprisingly young when it's not performing the role of Lord George. "Do you think I'm wrong to—" He stops. "I think," you say carefully, "that this is not a conversation I am able to have with you. Not here. Not in this house. But if we weren't—" He gestures at the room around them, the house, the relationship, the entire structure. "If we weren't," you say, "I might tell you that being wrong and being careful are not the same thing, and that the cost of being incautious is not one that falls equally on everyone." You stand. "My lord." He looks at you. "I genuinely cannot help you with this," you say. "But for what it's worth, which may not be much, I don't think you're wrong." You leave. In the corridor you breathe very carefully and deliberately, and you think about what you have and have not just done. You have not confirmed anything about yourself. You have not been explicit. You have said something that could be interpreted in multiple ways and is plausibly deniable on every level. You have also, in some way that you cannot quite name but can feel, extended something, a small grace, the knowledge that he is not the only person in this house carrying what he is carrying. Whether that is wisdom or foolishness, you're not sure. You go back to work. December continues. The house goes through its Christmas preparations, which in a household of this size are substantial. Special cleaning, special cooking, special entertaining. There are additional guests. There is additional service. You stand behind more chairs, carry more coal, pour more wine. On the second Saturday of December, you and James go to Covent Garden again. It is your fourth visit. You have come to know the room, to know which boards in the floor creak and which way the draught comes from under the door, to know that Mother Adams, whose real name you've now been told is Henry Compton, a man of 46 who came to London 20 years ago from Yorkshire, and who built this place through a combination of caution and the specific intelligence that comes from understanding what people need, sometimes plays cards at the table nearest the fire, and occasionally loses intentionally to make new guests feel comfortable. You've come to know some of the people. William the typesetter, who brings you information about trials and raids, with the careful precision of a man whose professional relationship with information makes him very aware of both its value and its danger. Francis from Somerset, who is actually a physician, you've discovered, with a practice in Holborn, who says little about his other life and a great deal with unexpected passion about the state of English medicine. A young man named Philip, barely 18, who came to London 6 weeks ago from Manchester, and who has the particular quality of an engine that has just found its fuel, moving fast, burning bright, terrifyingly inexperienced about what he's moving fast toward. James and you, standing near the fire or sitting at the table, or sometimes both standing near the window where the draught comes in and the cold keeps you close together, and no one can quite hear what you're saying to each other. This is a thing that has happened, that is happening, that doesn't have a name you're prepared to say even to yourself, but which is undeniable in the way that only very real things are undeniable. Something between you, not acted on, not acknowledged directly. The conversation in the dark street was the closest either of you has come to acknowledging it, and you have not repeated it, because repeating it would require deciding something, and deciding requires a kind of courage you're not sure you have. What you have instead is this: the nightly conversations in the butler's pantry that last slightly longer than they strictly need to. The way James always knows where you are in the room, the slight adjustment of his position that happens without seeming to happen. The way he sometimes, just occasionally says your name, your first name, Thomas, in a sentence where your surname would do equally well. The way these Saturday nights end at the servants' gate with neither of you quite ready to go inside. It is not enough. It is also, in the precise mathematics of this life, quite possibly more than is safe. You think about Samuel Greer in Newgate. The second Saturday of January, something happens that reorders all of it. You are at the house in Covent Garden. It's a quiet evening, fewer people than usual. The January cold has kept some people home, and 2 of the regulars are ill. You're standing near the bar talking to William about a trial that he's covering in his broadsheet. Something political, nothing to do with this world, when the door opens. The tall man at the door, whose name you now know is George, which causes you a private, uncomfortable moment of confusion every time you hear it, looks at the 2 people coming in, and something in his face changes. Not much, not dramatically. But you've been watching faces in service for years and you see it. A tightening, a decision being made. He lets them in. They're two men, both in their 30s. One of them you've seen before. He comes occasionally, keeps to himself, drinks in a corner. The other you've never seen. The other is looking at the room with a particular quality of attention that is different from the attention of someone seeing a place for the first time. You watch him. He sits down. He orders a drink. He drinks it with the concentrated focus of someone performing the act of drinking rather than actually drinking. And his eyes move around the room with a very specific quality, cataloguing. You have seen this kind of attention before. Mr. Fellows in the servants' hall on his rounds, the household steward making his weekly inventory, systematic attention, building a list. You find James. He's talking to Francis near the fire. You cross the room without rushing. Rushing draws attention. And you stand next to James with your shoulder against his shoulder, and you say quietly, "The man in the grey coat." A moment. James does not turn to look. "Who brought him?" James says. "The man who comes alone. The one in the corner." Another moment. "I need to speak to Mother Adams." "I know." James goes. You stay. You drink your ale slowly and you watch the man in the grey coat watch the room, and you feel, with a very clean and clarifying clarity, something very cold and very awake moving through your chest. This is what fear actually feels like, when it's specific. Not the general background fear of the last 2 years, the ambient awareness of risk, but the specific, present, certain fear of a particular threat in a particular room. You count the men in the room, 32, including yourself and James. The man in the grey coat is one man. He can't arrest 32 people alone. If he's an informer, he's taking descriptions, addresses, names if he can get them. If he's working toward a raid, the raid isn't tonight. Raids require constables, preparation, the specific moment of maximum occupancy. He's taking notes, either in his head or in something he's carrying under his coat. Mother Adams appears from the back room. He moves through the space with the practiced ease of a man in his own territory, pausing here and there, appearing to simply work the room. He reaches the man in the grey coat. There's a brief conversation. You can't hear it over the noise of the room. The man in the grey coat finishes his drink. He leaves. Mother Adams comes and stands beside you. He's a shorter man than you, with the slightly heavy build of someone who has been very thin and very hungry in the past and has never quite forgotten it, and a face that is capable of remarkable neutrality. He looks at the door the grey-coated man has just gone through. "His name is Reynolds," he says, to you and James both. "He works for a man named Archer." The name goes through you like cold water. "Is he an informer?" you ask. "He's been here before, 6 months ago, once. Nothing happened after. But now he's here again. Now he's here again." Mother Adams looks at his hands for a moment. He has large hands, working hands, the hands of a man who built something physical before he built this. "I want everyone here to leave within the next 30 minutes separately, no groups, and I want you to tell anyone you know who comes here that we're not meeting for the next 3 weeks. He says this with the calm of someone who has made this kind of decision before, which he has. 8 years of this, of exactly this kind of calculation. 3 weeks, James says, until I know how this sits. Whether Reynolds takes what he saw somewhere. A pause. He saw 32 men. He doesn't know all their names. He doesn't have addresses. An informer's testimony alone, without additional evidence, is harder to act on than the constables would like. But not impossible, William says. He has appeared beside you without you noticing, which is unnerving. Not impossible, Mother Adams agrees. Be careful, all of you. For the next 3 weeks, more if I say so, be careful. He moves away. The room begins to thin, men leaving in 1s and 2s, the departures spaced so that no one goes out into the street within sight of anyone else from the room. You and James leave separately. You go home the long way, the cold of January streets, the mud on the cobblestones where it hasn't yet frozen, the smell of the cold smoke and the river and the night. You walk quickly, not running, your hands in your coat pockets. The streets are relatively empty at this hour, but not empty enough that you can move without being seen. Your heart is not quite hammering, but it is elevated. The cold clarity of specific fear. You think about Reynolds cataloguing the room. You think about Archer with a list of 32 men. You think about addresses, about jobs, about the specific humiliation of being named, known, identified. You think about your blue coat with the silver buttons and Mr. Fellows's expression of precise approval and the Earl of Cavendish's household and the letter of recommendation from the rector in Weathersham. You think about your mother's face. You go home. You go to your partitioned cell. Edward is asleep. You lie down without undressing. The city sounds continue outside. A cart somewhere. A dog. The watchman calling 3 o'clock. You do not sleep. In the morning, at breakfast in the servants' hall, James looks at you across the table. His face gives nothing away. Professional. Exact. You give him the same. The first week passes. No constables arrive at the house. No one comes asking questions. You continue your work. You continue standing behind chairs and carrying coal and polishing silver. You continue being invisible. The second week passes. On a Tuesday of the second week, James finds you alone in the corridor. I had a message, he says. His voice is very quiet. Through William. Reynolds gave Archer a list. You look at him. They have names from the man who brought Reynolds. The man in the corner. His name is Hollis. He's a printer's apprentice. He gave Archer 4 names in exchange for... James stops. For not prosecuting his brother for something unrelated. 4 names in exchange for a brother. The arithmetic of fear. Precise and terrible. Whose names? Francis, James says. Philip, the young man from Manchester. A man named Bennett who I don't know well. And... He stops again. And... My name, James says. Hollis knew my name. The corridor, the cold stone, the sound of the house above you going about its business. How? You ask. I made an error, James says. His voice is completely steady, which is a kind of bravery. 6 months ago, before you started coming, I told Hollis my surname. I don't know why. It was an error. Can Mother Adams... Mother Adams has already been warned. He's helping Francis leave the city for a time. Philip he's getting word to. Bennett is already gone. He apparently had some warning we didn't. And you? James looks at you. His face. The face that exists underneath the professional face. My options are more limited, he says. I have a position here. I have references. I have a career in service. If I run, I lose all of that. If you don't, I know what the alternative is. He is very still. Archer doesn't have evidence. He has a name and a claim from an informer whose brother is a criminal. That's a weak case. A weak case that a good solicitor could pull apart. Do you have a good solicitor? He almost smiles, the smallest, most tired version of the smile. I have nothing. I have £4 and a set of inventory ledgers and the best reference in household service from a man who will immediately dismiss me if he hears the charge. You stand together in the corridor and you think about this. The specific mechanics of the catastrophe as it currently stands. I'm going to speak to Lord George, you say. Thomas. He has a solicitor. His family has solicitors. He has... You stop. Think. He has a particular interest, as it happens, in the consistency of English law as it applies to certain situations. James looks at you for a long moment. His expression moves through several things too quickly for you to catalogue all of them. That's a very large risk, he says, for you as well as for me. I know. If he uses the information against us. I know. Thomas, think about what you're offering to do. I've thought about it. This is true. You have thought about it in the 6 hours since James gave you this information, in the sleepless hours of the night, running through every version of every outcome. You have thought about it with the methodical care of a person who understands risk. The alternative is waiting for Archer to come to this house looking for you. He is quiet. Lord George, you say, is not the same kind of man as his father. You don't know that. No, you say. But I've had a number of very interesting conversations with him that suggest it. James looks at you. The thing in the wine cellar. The dark street. 22 months of careful attention. Be careful, he says. Always, you say. You find Lord George that afternoon. He's in the small study off the library, writing letters, alone. You knock. He says, come in. You close the door. He looks up. His expression when he sees you is the one you've catalogued. The direct attention, the something behind it. My lord, you say, I need to speak to you about a matter that requires discretion. He sets down his pen. You tell him what you need to tell him. Not everything. Not the room in Covent Garden, not your own position. But enough. A man named Hartley, under-butler in this household, against whom an informer's claim has been lodged. A constable named Archer. A case that requires, at minimum, a legal opinion on the quality of testimony from a compromised witness. You tell him this while standing very straight, and keeping your voice very steady, and looking at the wall just above his left shoulder, which is the standard servant's positioning for difficult conversations. He is quiet for a long time after you finish. Hartley, he says. He's been with the household for 5 years, my lord. I see. A pause. And how do you know about this case? Through contacts in the city, you say carefully. I'm not at liberty to be more specific. Another long pause. Ashworth. His voice is different. Not the voice he uses with servants. Not quite the voice he used in the library that day. Something else. If I help with this, if I involve family solicitors, it will become known in certain circles that I took an interest. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understand, my lord. I'm asking you, he says, whether you understand that I'm aware of what I'm being asked to expose myself to. You look at him directly, his actual face, the young one, the tired one. I understand, you say, and I'm asking anyway, because James Hartley is a good man who did nothing wrong in any sense that matters. Lord George looks at you for a very long moment. In any sense that matters, he repeats quietly. Yes, my lord. He picks up his pen, sets it down again. Leave me alone for a while, he says. Come back before supper. You come back before supper. He tells you the name of the solicitor. He tells you that the solicitor will expect James on Thursday morning, that the consultation will be covered from Lord George's personal accounts, and that Lord George would prefer that this conversation never happened. Of course, my lord, you say. He nods. He picks up his pen again. Ashworth, he says without looking up. My lord, whatever it is you know about me that I haven't told you, and I believe you do know something, I'm not sure how, I would ask that it remain as private as what I know about you. You're very still. I don't know anything about you, my lord, you say carefully. He glances up. His expression is perfectly controlled and completely readable to you. No, he says. Of course not. Good evening, Ashworth. Good evening, my lord. You go downstairs. You find James in the butler's pantry, and you tell him what has been arranged in a voice so quiet it is barely above the threshold of speech. He stands very still through all of it. When you finish, he is quiet for a long moment. You spoke to Lord George, he says. Yes. You told him. Enough. Yes. He looks at you. Why? He says very quietly. Not for my sake. Tell me the truth. Why? You think about the answer. You think about being careful and about the limits of carefulness. You think about 22 months in the wine cellar and a name said in a particular way in a dark street. Because, you say, I have been very careful for a long time, and it turns out that there are things I'm not willing to be careful about. He is very still. That's... He stops. I know what it is, you say. I know exactly what it is. He looks at you with the full weight of the actual attention, the real attention that exists underneath everything else. And he says very quietly, Thank you, Thomas. The next weeks are the strangest of your life. Or perhaps not strange. Strange implies unpredictable, and you have never been more acutely aware of the specific mechanics of what is happening than you are right now, but intense, heightened, every day carrying its full weight. The solicitor meets with James. He is apparently a man who has handled several cases like this, and who has strong opinions about the quality of informer testimony, and even stronger opinions about Constable Archer specifically, whose methods he considers professionally questionable. He believes, with professional confidence, that the case against James is weak, and that a formal proceeding, if it comes to one, will not go well for Archer. He says this, and then he does not say anything further about why he came to this case, who sent James to him, or the nature of the connection. He is a discreet man. Discreet men are worth more than gold in this city. Nothing comes of it in the immediate term. No constables appear. No charges are formally lodged. Constable Archer apparently has other cases, other targets, and the weak case against one under-butler in a respectable household may not be worth the energy of pursuing when there are easier prosecutions available. Francis, the physician from Somerset, leaves London for a month and returns to find that nothing has happened in his absence. Philip, the young man from Manchester, is not so lucky. He is picked up not at the Covent Garden house, but at a different address, a place Mother Adams doesn't know about, and he spends 3 weeks in prison before being released without charge on a technicality that William explains to you in precise legal terms that you mostly follow. Philip returns to the house in Covent Garden 6 weeks after his release, thinner and quieter, with a particular look in his eyes that you recognise, the look of someone who has seen clearly what the stakes are and decided to live with them anyway. You sit with him for an hour one Saturday. You don't say much. Some things don't need saying. When Mother Adams reopens the house, 4 weeks of closure, not 3. Cautious Henry Compton, who has never gotten this wrong in 8 years. You are there on the first night. James is there. William is there. Francis is there. Philip, yes, is there. 32 men Reynolds catalogued. 12 are here tonight. 20 missing. Gone, dispersed, fled, or simply too frightened to return. This is the toll. This is what the raid that didn't happen. The list that was made has cost 20 men who walked out of this room and never came back. You think about them sometimes. The craftsmen by the fire, the men you talked to briefly, whose first names you knew and nothing more. Where they went. What version of the invisible life they're living now, in whatever city or village or household they've retreated to. You hope they're all right. You have no way of knowing. You carry the not knowing the way you carry everything else, close to the skin under the official surface. February arrives, the coldest month. The marble entrance hall is frigid in the mornings in a way that gets into your knees even through the stockings, and the cold tap of the servant's basin has been known, on the worst mornings, to run solid ice that you have to break with your fist. The coal scuttles get heavier in cold weather, or seem to. Perhaps you're imagining it, or perhaps there's a psychological weight to carrying fuel in cold weather that doesn't apply in warm. You carry it. Your hands are cracked at the knuckles, the skin dry and split in the small creases. The way that service hands always are in winter. Beeswax helps. You have a small pot of it that you apply at night. James has the same cracked knuckles. You notice this with the specific precision of someone who's been paying attention for 22 months and is still paying attention. One Saturday evening in February, you're in the house in Covent Garden and it's quiet. A cold night, attendance down, the fire extra necessary and extra welcome, and you're sitting at the table near the window with James and Francis and William, and someone has brought out a pack of cards and suggested a game, and you play for an hour with the very small stakes of pennies that no one really cares about, and the much larger stakes of ordinary human presence, of being in a room where you're allowed to be what you actually are. You're losing the card game with some distinction. This is partly because you're not naturally gifted at cards, and partly because you keep losing track of the game in favour of whatever James is saying to Francis about the Earl of Cavendish's wine collection, which is apparently more interesting to you than winning. James catches you not watching your cards and raises an eyebrow. "Your hand," he says. "I know what my hand is." "Then play it." "I'm thinking." "You're not thinking about the cards." Francis looks between the two of you with the diagnostic expression of a physician. William is looking at his own cards. You play your card. It's the wrong card. You lose the hand. "There," you say. "There," James agrees, collecting the pennies. Outside, the February cold continues. The cobblestones of Covent Garden are slick with a thin coating of ice that has accumulated since afternoon. The market stalls are shuttered and dark. The theatre crowd is thick on the piazza, well wrapped, moving fast. Inside, the fire and the light and the voices. This is the thing. This is the fragile, precious, dangerous thing that exists in the space between the public life and whatever comes after. The card game, the low voices, the warmth of a room that knows what it is and exists anyway. You think about Samuel Greer in Newgate. He gets out in the spring. You know this from William, who tracks these things with the quiet determination of someone keeping a record. He gets out in April with 6 months spent and a history that follows him like a smell you can't wash off, that attaches to his name in the particular way that certain kinds of history do. What happens to him after? Where he goes, whether anyone helps him, whether he rebuilds anything, you don't know. Some lives scatter, some reassemble. You hope, in the impractical way you hope things you can't control, that his reassembles. The spring, when it comes, has the particular quality that spring in London always has, a sudden, almost aggressive freshness that lasts about 2 weeks before the city reclaims it. before the coal smoke and the sewage and the sheer mass of habitation overwhelm the new green and the smell of rain and the particular light of April mornings. You carry coal in the spring. They don't stop the fires until May, and the scuttles are lighter, and the stairs are less cold, and the marble entrance hall has something almost pleasant about it in the morning, the pale light coming through the fanlight above the door. Lord George leaves for the country in March. The family go to their estate in Berkshire for 2 months, which means the London house operates in a reduced capacity, a skeleton staff maintaining the building in their absence. For those of you who stay, you stay, James stays, a core staff of 10, it is something like a respite. Less formal service, more time. You spend this time in small ways that would be invisible to anyone else, but which have, for you, the quality of something almost like ordinary life. You and James eat supper in the kitchen rather than the servants' hall at a smaller table, and talk in a way that's different from the way you talk during normal service. Longer conversations, less guarded, about things that don't have anything to do with wine inventories or polishing schedules. He talks about his childhood, about his father the butler, about the specific quality of growing up in houses like this one, and what it teaches you about the distance between people and the things that maintain that distance. You talk about Weathersham, about the rector who wrote your reference, about the way that cities change the way you see everything that came before them. You talk about the house in Covent Garden, not carefully, not in the oblique way you always have. Actually talk about it, about the people who go there, about what it means to have a place like that, about what it costs people when places like that are destroyed. James talks about Samuel Greer. He knew him. Not well. They overlapped here for 6 months before Greer left. But he knew him well enough to have a picture of him in mind, a specific person rather than an abstract case. A man who was good at his job, who made excellent coffee, who played cards on Saturday evenings and lost badly and laughed about it. He'll be out in April, you say. I know. Will he come back? To the house? No. No, he can't. He was dismissed when the arrest was made. Mr. Fellows dismissed him in absentia. A pause. To the city? I don't know. Probably. Where else would he go? Where else would any of them go? The city is the place where the invisible life is possible, because the city is large enough to contain the invisible. A village doesn't have the volume to hold what needs to be hidden. A city this size can carry secrets the way a river carries silt, invisibly, constantly, in suspension. London, where you can walk from the poorest street in the worst parish to the steps of a royal palace in 20 minutes, where a man can spend 12 hours a day being decorative furniture in a great house and spend his Saturday evenings being himself in a room in Covent Garden, where the whole contradictory, dangerous, alive mess of human life is packed into 1 square mile of history and smoke. You wouldn't be anywhere else. The family returns in May. The house returns to full service. You return to carrying coal and polishing silver and standing behind chairs and being invisible. The difference is that you know, now, with a clarity you didn't have before, what the invisibility is protecting, not a void, not an absence. A room in Covent Garden and a card game played with small stakes. A conversation in a kitchen during the 2 months the house is quiet. A name said in a particular voice in a dark street. A man named James Hartley, under-butler, who has been in this household for 5 years, and who will be in it, you think, for considerably more, who keeps inventory ledgers in meticulous order, and has ink-stained hands, and who, on Saturday evenings when you're both free and the walk to Covent Garden is cold and dark and potentially dangerous, and absolutely worth it, says your name in the way that indicates you're being seen and not merely looked at. This is not nothing. This is not nothing, and the world has done its considerable best to make you believe it is, to make you believe that what you carry is weightless, that what you are is nothing, that the discipline of concealment is the most important thing, and the thing concealed is a mistake, a disorder, something to be corrected or suppressed or punished into non-existence. The world is wrong. You know this the way you know your own hands in the dark, the way you know the difference between tallow and beeswax candles without looking, just from the smell, the way you know in your own body what it means to be tired in a way that has nothing to do with work, the kind of tired that comes from carrying the wrong thing for too long. You know this. In June, you celebrate your 2.5 years in London by doing nothing in particular to mark it, because there is no ceremony for the kind of anniversary this is. But you notice it. You stand in the entrance hall one morning with the marble cold under your feet and the early light coming through the fanlight and the house quiet around you just before the day begins, and you think, 2.5 years, this city, this work, this life, you're still here. The full, complicated, frightening, occasional joy of that. Still here. Summer brings the particular London heat that is its own category of experience. The heat plus the smell, the coal smoke and the sewage and the Thames and the accumulated exhalation of 500,000 people. All of it amplified by warmth into something almost tangible. The streets in August smell like you could cut them into pieces. The heat in the servants' quarters, below stairs, near the kitchen fires that run all day regardless of the temperature outside is formidable. You carry coal in the summer too, because the upper floors need fires even in summer evenings, because the family is cold in the evenings regardless of the outside temperature, because the comfort of the upstairs is maintained by labour that has no off-season. Your hands in summer are different from your hands in winter. In winter they crack, in summer they sweat, and the sweat combines with the coal dust and the polish and the carrying to produce a particular quality of grime that is the signature of this work, that no amount of the brown water from the basin quite removes. You notice your own hands the way you notice James's hands, practically as instruments, as indicators of the season and the workload, and the state of the body that operates them. One evening in July, a Saturday, walking back from Covent Garden with James through the warm streets, you pass a coffee house with its windows open to the night. Inside, the sound of conversation and the smell of coffee and tobacco. Outside, on the step, a man is sitting with a pamphlet in his hands, reading in the pool of light from the window. As you pass, you catch a fragment of what he's reading. Something about Parliament. Something about law. James glances at you. "Something Fielding wrote," he says quietly. "I read it last week in the Strand. Someone left it at a coffee house. Is it? Not directly, but adjacent. There are people who think..." He pauses. "There are people who think that certain laws are barbaric, that they're inconsistent with the principles of English liberty. They can't say it directly, obviously, but they can write around it. They can write adjacent to it. Adjacent to it. The way you live your whole life adjacent to it, present but not acknowledged, visible and invisible simultaneously. Lord George thinks something similar, you say. You haven't mentioned the library conversation to James, the specific contents of it. You've told him only that Lord George has particular reasons for the interest he took in helping." "I know what Lord George thinks," James says. He says it with the certainty of someone who has watched the same household for 5 years, with the same careful attention you've been applying for 2.5. He's young. Give him 10 years and the courage of his actual convictions, and he might say it plainly. Or the world might change. Or the world might change, James agrees. He says it with neither optimism nor its opposite. Just the fact of the possibility. The world does change. You know this from history as you've absorbed it in pamphlets and broadsheets and the conversations of people around dinner tables you've served. It changes in ways no one predicted, in directions no one had the courage to describe. Things that are illegal become merely disapproved, and things that are merely disapproved become permitted, and things that are permitted become, eventually, unremarkable. 200 years is a long time to wait. But 200 years ago the Buggery Act was new, and perhaps 200 years from now it will be old. History. You walk home. You don't say this to James, because it's too large and too uncertain, and because the question of what happens 200 years from now is entirely abstract. And the question of what happens tomorrow morning, when you have to be at the coal scuttles by 5:30 and the family wants breakfast at 8, is entirely concrete, and you have always been a person who works with what is concrete. What is concrete? The house in Covent Garden, Mother Adams, 8 years and still standing. What is concrete? James's ink-stained hands and the inventory ledgers and the Thursday morning conversations over the account books. What is concrete? The work, the season, the particular smell of this city in this summer, the warmth of a walk home through streets that are at this hour almost quiet. What is concrete? You're still here. The summer moves. September, October, the year turning. You have been in London for 2.5 years now, will have been in this house for most of those, and the city has become what you sometimes think of as your second language. You speak it without having to think about the grammar. You navigate it by instinct. You know which streets to avoid and which pubs are safe and which turns to take when you're carrying something and want to avoid the worst of the cart traffic. You know James Hartley's face in all its weather, the professional face, the face in the house in Covent Garden, the face at the kitchen table during the months the family is away. You know the almost smile and the actual smile that exists below it and comes out rarely and for reasons that are not theatrical. You know the way he holds a wine glass and the way he stands when he's tired and the way he says your name. You know, and this is the knowledge that lives in the partition cell with you, that this particular thing you're living, this careful, hidden, Saturday evening, silver-polished thing, is not the life you would choose if choosing were possible without cost. If you could choose without cost, you would choose plainly and say plainly, and be seen plainly in a way that this city, this year, this law, do not permit. You cannot choose without cost. The cost is specific, and you know it. Newgate, the pillory, the rope, the loss of everything you've built. So you choose this instead. The life that's possible, the Saturday evenings, the room in Covent Garden, the ink-stained hands and the name said in a particular way. It is not everything. It is also not nothing. You have learned, in 2.5 years in London, to know the difference. October deepens. The trees in the square behind the house, you can see them from the attic window, turn the colours of autumn in the particular London way, which is less vivid than autumn in Suffolk but more constant. The colour lasting longer in the city, the leaves hanging on longer, as if the density of urban life makes even the trees more stubborn. Edward has grown 3 inches since you arrived. He is a man now, in the physical sense. No longer the boy you found snoring on the other side of the partition. He is still not a man in the service sense, or that takes longer, but he carries himself differently, with a slight confidence that he's earned through 2.5 years of this work. You've watched him grow. This is strange to realise. You've watched someone grow up, and the watching has happened in the gaps between your own concerns, the way a river watches a tree grow on its bank without particularly intending to. Mr. Fellows, who has not changed, has told you twice in the last 6 months that your work is consistently appropriate. This is, you have come to understand, the highest possible praise from Mr. Fellows, the equivalent in his language of a standing ovation. The Earl has had a word with you once directly about the handling of a piece of correspondence that required delicacy, a matter involving a guest who was not who they claimed to be, and whom you were required to process through the entrance hall without making anyone aware that you had clocked the discrepancy. You handled it correctly, and the Earl told you so in the brief, formal way that men of his position tell servants things. It was, you understood, a sign of something. Trust, perhaps, or at minimum professional recognition. You are good at this work. This is not a surprise to you, because you chose it partly for its difficulty, but it is a satisfaction. The specific satisfaction of a thing done well is not nothing. It matters, in the particular economy of a life where many things cannot be said or done openly, to have something at which you can be openly good. You carry this too, along with everything else. On a Saturday in November, exactly 1 year since the Saturday when James said Covent Garden in the corridor and you said all right, you go to the house in Covent Garden for the 15th time, roughly, having lost count somewhere around the 10th. You have become a familiar face there. Mother Adams nods at you when you arrive. George at the door doesn't examine you any more. William always saves you the seat nearest the fire. You sit in that seat. James sits beside you. The fire is warm. The ale is the same as always. The fiddle is playing something you've come to know. You don't say anything about the anniversary, because it's not exactly the kind of thing you say. But James, who has also been keeping count, gives you the almost smile when you sit down, the one that happens under the professional face, the real one. You raise your cup. He raises his. No words. Words aren't necessary. The fire, the light, the sound of voices not managing themselves for an audience. You stay for 2 hours. You walk home through November streets, the cold, a familiar thing now rather than a shock. The cobblestones under your feet known stones. This city your city, in the particular way that cities become yours when you have survived them long enough. At the servants' gate, James stops. The cold is sharp. Your breath comes out in small clouds. The sky above the back of the house is the particular dark of a London November night. Not black, but a sort of dark grey. The clouds pressing low, the city's light reflected up at them from below. He looks at you. You look at him. Thomas, he says. Yes. I have been. He stops. Starts again. I have been thinking about what I want to say, and I am discovering that the precision I normally apply to these situations is failing me. Say what you mean, you say. Just say what you mean. A pause. I would like... He stops again. His professional face is doing exactly nothing. He is just his face. I would like this, he gestures, a small gesture that indicates you, him, the gate, the city, all of it. To be something. That it already is, I know, but something that is... He stops. Named, you say. He looks at you. Something that is named, you say. Between us. A very long pause. That's exactly what I mean, he says. You stand in the cold servants' entrance of an Earl's London house in November 1728, and the thing between you, which has been 22 months old and then 2 years old, and then 2.5 years old, and which has never had a name is, in this moment, named, without a word that names it, but named. This is London, 1728. This is the law as it stands, the pillory as it functions, the Buggery Act 200 years old and still on the books. This is the specific geography of your life. A partitioned cell in a basement, a butler's pantry, a house in Covent Garden visited on Saturdays, a professional face worn for 12 hours a day. This is also this, a servant's gate, 2 men, the cold, the breath coming out in clouds, the city's dark above them, something named. Go inside, James says. It's cold. You first. He almost smiles. He goes inside. You follow. The months move. The seasons. You have lived in this city now for 3 years, and the texture of that time is dense and specific. The particular weight of the coal scuttle on the 3rd step of the service staircase, where the step is slightly higher than the others, and your body accounts for it now without thought. The smell of the butler's pantry in winter, polish and wine and cold stone. The sound of the servants' hall at supper, 8 voices, the particular rhythm of that community. You know this house the way you know your own body, its habits and its weaknesses and the places where things break. The board in the servants' corridor that warns you the housekeeper's coming. The moment in the afternoon when the household makes its slight shift from morning mode to evening mode. The quality of the light in the upper rooms changing. The way the formal dining table vibrates slightly, almost imperceptibly when carriages pass too close in the street. You know James the way you know this house, which is not entirely, not even mostly, because he has the same layered privacy that you have, the same architecture of public and private. But you know the parts you're permitted to know, which are more than you knew a year ago, and less than you would like, and exactly what is possible. What is possible in this life, in this city, in this year, has a specific shape. You have mapped its edges. Within those edges you live. Lord George, who left for the country and came back, changed in a way you couldn't entirely name. Quieter, somehow, with less of the performed confidence and more of something actual. Finds you in the library again one afternoon in March. He is reading. He has been reading more than he used to. He looks up when you bring in the afternoon tray of coffee. Ashworth, he says. My lord. How is Hartley? You pour the coffee. Very well, my lord. I believe his inventory is particularly accurate this quarter. A pause. Lord George does the thing he does. Looks at you like a person. Good, he says. I'm glad to hear it. You leave the coffee, you leave the library. In the corridor you breathe for a moment. Then you go back to work. The work continues. It will always continue. The coal and the silver and the standing behind chairs. The morning basin of cold water. The wig that is not you, but that you wear because the world requires it. But underneath the wig and the livery and the professional face, Thomas Ashworth from Weathersham, Suffolk, 21 years old, and then 22 and then 23, is still there. Present, intact, shaped now by the city in ways he was not shaped when he arrived, carrying things he didn't know he'd carry, knowing things he didn't know he'd know, still here. The city presses around you with its fogs and its fires and its particular quality of beauty and horror existing simultaneously. 200 feet apart, a marble entrance hall and a gin shop, a gilded ceiling and a corpse in the gutter, the richest empire in the world and the worst prison in Europe. You live in it. Saturday evenings, the house in Covent Garden, Mother Adams playing cards with slightly intentional losses, William with his broadsheet news, Francis, who is a physician, and tells you things about the human body that you file away as useful knowledge. Philip, who came here from Manchester barely 18 and is now 20, and has the eyes of someone who has learned that the world is dangerous and chose to live in it anyway. James, the thing named, the thing carried, the thing that exists in the spaces between the professional world and the particular address of the room in Covent Garden and the servants' gate at 11 at night. This is your life. It is not the life you would have chosen if choosing had no cost. It is the life that is possible. You live in it with everything you have. Outside, the city is settling into night. November again, another November, the year turning as years do. The streets are quieting in the particular gradual way that London quiets, by degrees, never quite reaching silence. Somewhere down the street, a watchman is beginning his rounds. A cart passes, late. The horse's hooves loud in the relative quiet. The candle on the windowsill of your petition cell is burning down. You've read as much as you can by it. A pamphlet that William sent through the network. Something philosophical, something adjacent to, but not directly about, the things you're always thinking about. Adjacent. The way everything in your life is adjacent to what it would be in a world that was different. The pamphlet says something about the nature of liberty, about the difference between laws made to protect people and laws made to punish them for what they are rather than what they do. You read it carefully, in the way you read everything carefully, extracting what is useful and filing the rest. You blow out the candle, darkness fills the room, you lie down. The sounds of the city drift up through the floors and the stone. Cart somewhere, a dog, brief, the watchman calling the hour. You think about tomorrow, the 5:30 start, the coal, the breakfast service, the silver, the ordinary machinery of the work that fills your days. You think about Saturday, 3 days away, the walk through Covent Garden, the 3 steps down, the warmth and the light and the fiddle. You think about James on the other side of the house, in the room that is slightly better than your partition cell because he has seniority, lying perhaps as you are lying, perhaps thinking the adjacent thing. You think about this city, the size of it. 500,000 people in their beds tonight, each of them carrying whatever they carry, the weight of it, exactly their own weight, exactly the weight of their particular life. The weight of yours is known to you now. You've had 3 years to learn its contours. Some of it is heavy, some of it is lighter than you expected. Some of it, the parts you would never have predicted, has a kind of beauty to it. The beauty of the thing that persists in spite of everything, that finds its way toward what it needs in the few hours available to it, that refuses in the end to be nothing. The city breathes around you. You breathe with it. Your hands at your sides, cracked at the knuckles, coal-dusted, beeswax softened. Your hands that carry things, your hands that polish things to their proper brightness, your hands at rest. There is something in that, in the rest. After the long day and the long discipline, the particular relief of the body that has done its work and can now simply be. You don't need to be anything right now. You don't need to stand straight. You don't need to keep your face arranged. You don't need to be invisible. In this room, in this darkness, you can simply be what you are. Thomas Ashworth, footman, 23 years old, Suffolk originally, London now. Still here after 3 years, still intact, still carrying what you carry with the particular dignity of someone who has chosen to carry it well. The sounds of the city are fading as sleep approaches. Not fading because the city is stopping, but fading because you are starting to leave it. to move down through the levels of consciousness into the territory where the city doesn't reach. Down there, in sleep, there's a room where all the things that can't be said are said plainly, where what you are is not a matter for concealment, where James's name in your thoughts is a simple thing, not a careful thing. Down there, the house in Covent Garden never gets raided. Down there, the Buggery Act is a thing someone wrote down 200 years ago that doesn't apply to you because in that territory, nothing applies to you except your own nature. Down there, you're warm, fed, present. That's enough. You've learned this about yourself. That's more than enough. Let the city continue above you. Let the watchman call his hours. Let the coal fires burn down and the candles gutter and the morning come eventually, as it always does, carrying its requirements. Let it all continue. You've been here 3 years. You'll be here tomorrow. The room in Covent Garden will be there on Saturday. James will say your name. And somewhere in the city tonight, hundreds of other men are lying awake or falling asleep, carrying what they carry, finding the rooms that exist for them, living the lives that are possible in the world as it is, rather than the world as they would have it be. None of them need to be anything right now. Centuries from now, this city will change beyond what you could imagine. These laws will end. The Buggery Act will be repealed and replaced, and the replacements will be argued over. And eventually, in a future so far from this room that it feels like mythology, there will be men who walk openly down the streets of London with their names and their faces fully visible, and no one will arrest them for it. You can't see that future from here, but you can feel its direction. And tonight, in this room, in this particular November of 1728, that direction is enough. Sleep comes, soft, gradual, the particular mercy of the body that has worked hard and carried much and finally at the end of the day is allowed to set it down. Set it down. All of it. The livery and the wig and the neutral face and the careful words and the specific discipline of the invisible life. Set it all down. Sleep now. Rest now. The morning will come soon enough with its coal and its cold water and its requirements. But now, just now, rest. You've earned it. The city breathes. You breathe with it. And then, very gently, very quietly, so gradually you won't know quite when it happens, rest. Good night.